Hello, everybody. Happy Thursday. Thank you so much for joining our webinar. As the attendees start to trickle on, we'll just give everybody a couple seconds, a little run through of the sidebar, our chat here on the public. That's where you can converse and maybe mention where you're joining in from. The Q&A tab will be where we can log any questions that you guys may have throughout. Feel free to message at any time, and I'll bring some of those up to Max as he goes through the presentation. And we're so excited to get started. But I'm joining in from Philadelphia, PA, and Max, you're in Denver, right?
Yeah, just outside of Boulder, Colorado.
Love it. That's so fun. Just a little icebreaker. I know the holidays are coming up. What's your favorite Thanksgiving item at a Thanksgiving dinner?
So I am not about your standard Thanksgiving food. I think turkey is boring, things like that. So the last couple of years, I've actually made duck. So don't know if I'll be making that again this year or something different, but yeah, I like to keep it a little bit original.
That's awesome. I'm having a little Friendsgiving, and I have to say mine is probably not a crowd favorite, but green bean casserole.
Green bean casserole is undeniably good. So, yeah. I mean, bacon, cream, it's great.
Yes. All right. As people are joining in, if you could just mention where you're joining in from so we can make sure to engage with the audience, that'd be amazing. And it's 2:01, so I think we'll start to get into it. Awesome. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day this Thursday to hop on our webinar with Spiff. This is the 2024 Sales Comp Planning, Bigger Goals, Better Plans. As we know, as the years go on, our expectations just increase. So really excited to dive into some of the tactics to help you guys accomplish all of your goals in the coming year. We have here today Max Sadler. He is our sales comp expert at Spiff. He's the go-to guy for any questions and really just getting the best advice on comp strategy. I've learned so much from him myself in my time here at Spiff. So Max, could you just do a little intro for yourself and a little history on your sales comp experience?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Megan. So as Megan said, I'm Max Sadler. Should probably update that photo. That was a while ago, and my hair obviously doesn't look like that anymore. But just a little bit about my background. I actually started at a legacy player within the space in the implementation department, where I focused on enterprise implementations for a number of years. Before then, going on quite a journey, working on the partner team, a little stint in product as well. Before coming over to Spiff, again on the implementation team, focusing on the go-to-market side of things. So needless to say, I have encountered a ton of different comp plans, and I can also assure you, no matter what you think, your comp plan is not that crazy, not that unique, and not that complicated. I've definitely seen some crazy ones out there, but the vast majority are all pretty standard. So don't sweat it if you think you have the most special comp plan in the world. Further details about me, my background and my degrees are actually in biology, so I definitely have the credentials to talk about sales comp. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks, Megan.
I love it. I didn't know that. But yes, as Max said, he does such a great job at simplifying the entire process. So super excited to dive in. As a reminder, we'll send out the recording of this webinar once it's complete. So if you want to share this with any other employees, you'll have the chance to do so. As well as at the top, you'll see a Get Demo. If you do have any further questions, please feel free to click that link and then we can continue to chat. But for now, I'm going to pass it over to Max, and I'm super excited to dive into the 2024 planning. I think this will be awesome. Thanks, Max.
Cool. Thanks, Megan. And just a quick call out I want to say, if you could all put any comments, questions in either the chat or the Q&A. I like to try and keep these as interactive as possible as we go. I know that's a little hard with a webinar format, but just anything that comes to mind throughout, I am happy to address. But without further ado, the first thing I want to touch on is just kind of the current landscape of comp, particularly in the year 2023. So I'm sure it will come as no surprise to any of you that 2023 has been a year of change. We went from a period of unprecedented growth, free money from all the VCs and PEs, then dove straight into this new reality of working remote and working hybrid, all culminating in rapid change this year in 2023. So, now in my experience, more on the go-to-market side of things, I've had to experience this firsthand. But just some of the things I want to put out there to jog all of your, just your thoughts and memory here are, how are your teams performing against quota? Do you think that you had misses in quota, just not anticipating the changes that were going to be coming down the line? Did business just kind of get pushed off? We've obviously seen a ton of changes in business trends throughout this year. Projects being deprioritized, huge reductions in pipeline, timelines pushing. So all these things are obviously going to affect your bottom line. And when you're thinking about the people on the front lines, the reps, the SDRs generating that pipeline, they're feeling this very much so. So I think, we're going to get into this later, but definitely a lot of opportunity to step back and analyze what happened this year and think about these things like your quotas, like the targets that you were going after and things like that. A few other trends that I've noticed personally, and I'd love to hear from you if you also notice them, is just changing in personas of who's making the key decisions. On the simple front there, I'm seeing a lot more scrutiny from, the CFO personally. So that's definitely, just kind of bringing more attention from executives and higher ups into the decision process. But also just literally complete shifts in which teams are analyzing the types of tools that we sell here at Spiff. And I'm sure the tools that you sell as well. A lot of focus has been brought onto things like capital efficiency, cutting costs, things like that. So you see a lot more decisions being put in teams like finance or accounting rather than teams like sales ops or rev ops or even just the sales department itself, who previously could make decisions really quickly, didn't really, have too much attention to detail on things like budget and things like that. So definitely a big shift there. And then finally, contract negotiation changes. We're going to get into more detail here later, but just super common things we're seeing with all the uncertainty is a resistance to things like paying annual upfront. Lots of creative billing structures in place. And also, things like discounting upfront in the first year, hoping that, we can get things across the finish line in this initial term, but still kind of preserve that margin for later in the contract. So again, just kind of moving ahead here, all of us have had to navigate these shifting markets, and a key component to that is being able to implement quickly on the changes that you want to make, analyze their impact, and then iterate further. Again, we'll get into this further in a little bit here, but without the appropriate tools, without the appropriate data and the strategy to actually go about this, a lot of us are just kind of, pulling things out of a hat, right? Making complete guesses. So it's really important that moving into 2024, we all take a step back and think about what do we need to have in place to address our strategy and to actually be able to be nimble, to be able to analyze, implement, iterate, things like that. And then the other piece of this too is anytime you are nimble and making changes on the fly, transparency and communication become absolutely key. If you're constantly changing your quotas or tweaking your comp plans, things like that, and your reps have no idea what's going on, then you're just going to build mistrust. They're going to get frustrated because they're feeling like they're moving towards moving targets constantly. And it's really just not going to incentivize the behavior you want. So as long as you can clearly communicate and, more importantly, explain the why behind the changes that are being made, you'll be able to keep that momentum with your reps, keep that trust with them, and ultimately drive towards the objectives you're trying to reach with those changes. And then finally, I'm sure this is kind of cliche. People hear it all the time, thinking back to like 2009, everyone's like, why didn't I buy a house then, right? So it's impossible to fully predict the future here, but this really is an opportunity to play offense. We are all feeling it. Our competitors are feeling it. So any way that we can be more creative in how we go about our business, that just represents a huge opportunity for us. So it's time to throw out the old playbook and think about the new in ways that you can capitalize on these shifting markets.
I love that, Max. How are you guys brainstorming those new ideas? Do you guys have weekly meetings, broader sales team meetings? What does that look like? Just so people can have a gauge on how that conversation and transparency is being had.
Yeah, great question. So To be honest, at least with my style, and I think the style of how we operate at Spiff, we're super nimble with that approach. So when we start seeing trends, we first need to make sure that they're not just anecdotes, right? So we kind of collaborate as a team to see, hey, are you seeing these same shifting trends? Here on the enterprise team at Spiff, we actually have a weekly call with just reps. We cut leadership out of it completely, so that it can fulfill that need of being like a venting space, but it's also like the tactical. What are we seeing on the ground without the pressure of having to think about this with leadership present on the call? But that really allows us as a team to kind of formulate our thoughts and then more effectively bring that up to leadership so that we can adapt. So lots of opportunity there as well. But the key is just constantly being aware, observing, and thinking about, what is happening? What's actually the root cause there? Can we figure out what that root cause is, and how are we going to act on it?
I love that. I love the pack getting aligned before bringing it to leadership. Of course, you want them involved and they're a part of those decisions, but that really just kind of, to me, creates that team culture. That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Super effective here at Spiff, and I'd encourage you all to pursue something similar to that. So just a quick quote that kind of resonated here from Gardner. Sales leaders are expected to increase business revenue while managing a cost-effective function. This is true now in 2023 more than ever. Again, like I said, we don't have the free money from the VCs anymore. You can't just go hire 100 sales reps to farm pipeline and things like that. You have to be really conscious about things that are going to maximize your business while also being efficient. So this can mean really getting into the nitty-gritty of what are those, really high margin type activities? How can we save time? How can we maximize output from fewer resources? So this is definitely something front and center for most companies out there today. So now that we've talked about 2023, let's kind of look ahead here to the importance of sales comp in 2024. So 2024 is going to be the year where we adapt to what changed in 2023. But also, I think it's a huge opportunity to think even further into the future. It's important to not just be super reactive here. We want to think about what are going to be the lasting impacts of these changes. Are we going to see some things shift back, which, I can personally say we're starting to see some of that fear from early in the year dissipate. So we're able to react to that because we planned for it. As well as just, some things that are going to have much more long-term success, like these more creative pricing structures and billing structures and contracts that we've had to put together as a result of this year. It's really opened our eyes to rethinking how we go about things in general, and is very much reusable beyond just reacting to things that changed this year. But a couple key things to call out here. It's important that we perfect the sales planning process. This has never been more important. And we're going to get into some more detail here, but in general, when you're able to effectively plan and then execute on those plans, then you're able to do everything we've talked about so far in terms of analyzing, making the changes that you need to make, and then moving forward and doing that again. Final bullet point here. This word has been beaten to death this year, but obviously inflation is front and center. Hybrid selling is on the surge here in terms of, we went from being in person to fully remote. Now we're starting to see things like the desire to go back on site to sell in person, seeing a lot of changes there. So definitely something to consider as well. And then any of the other challenges that we've faced this year, which I'd also say have very disproportionately affected different verticals. So one thing we've done here at Spiff is, software has always been our bread and butter, but it's been time to kind of rethink that. And we're finding tons of success outside of software that I think we didn't even think about before. So it's really opened our eyes to what else is out there that we're not thinking about, and how can we identify that and act on it. So key things here in terms of these stats is knowing how to motivate your team will drive the right behaviors and drastically increase sales performance. So these stats should come as no surprise to you, but on the right, 90% of top performing companies utilize an incentive program. Shouldn't be any surprise, shouldn't be a secret that if you have variable comp that incentivizes certain behaviors and it's effective and it's communicated clearly, you can drive those behaviors, and your reps are going to be motivated to achieve their goals. Additionally, 44% properly structured incentive programs can increase employee performance by 44%. And companies using an incentive program reported a 79% success rate achieving goals when the correct reward was offered. And that's a really key point there. Not only does it have to be the correct reward, but it has to be very clear what it is you're incentivizing so that the rep can draw that one-to-one correlation of do this, get that. So aligning comp planning with execution. When we talk about comp planning, the number one thing that we need to think about is aligning to your business objectives. Like I just said, if you have a very specific business objective that the whole company is marching towards, so maybe in the context of 2023, it's boosting margins, then it needs to be very clear in the comp plan that you are designing that whatever metric you're using to measure that and then what the reward is for it is a very one-to-one relationship between the objective, the behavior, and the outcome. If you don't have that, if you get too clever with how you're crafting these things, there's going to be too much of a disconnect between what the rep understands about their plan and then how they act and what you're actually trying to accomplish. So just a quick little example here. I'm sure we'd all love to have built-in price increases in our contracts. So I've seen comp plans that do these crazy calculations for quota relief that take into account a certain percentage of the ending ARR, certain percentage of the starting ARR, and spit out this, derived figure for quota relief. That is accomplishing the business objective of incentivizing price increase, but at the same time, what rep is actually going to understand that? So if you want to incentivize price increase, just make that super clear of here's a little spiff or a multiplier or whatever you want to put in the plan, and it's just your price increase spiff. And maybe you could do like a tiered structure of higher the multiple or higher the percentage increase, the higher payout you're going to get. So that's driving the same behavior, and the rep actually understands what's going on there. So going into the second point, kind of what I just said, incentivizing the right behaviors in the right way. You know what behaviors you need to incentivize, but it's really important that you do so in the right way, in a way that they understand, in a way that feels actionable to them. Now, all of this is great, but no one is going to get their comp plan right on the first shot. So it's also important that you measure and iterate, as well as you're not afraid to be nimble throughout the entire process. But referencing back to my former point here, you need to do this, but you also need to be very clear and communicate what it is you're doing, why you're doing it, and make sure that your reps are on board with what's being done. If you're making too many changes and it's not clear, what the driver is for that, then the reps are going to start to lose trust and just get frustrated with the process. And then finally, as we've been saying throughout this whole thing, you need to adapt to the changing business landscape, which means you have to have an ear out there, listening to what's going on, learning what's happening in the market, seeing the trends both anecdotally with your reps as well as the broader trends that you're seeing throughout. So planning is great. Obviously, you need to nail the planning side of things. But if you don't have an effective path to actually executing on that comp plan, so specifically you do all that planning, make a comp plan, and then throw it in a spreadsheet where no one can actually see it, you're really not going to hit the mark there either. So with comp execution, just a couple key things to keep in mind for effectiveness here are you need real-time visibility. You need a tool that's going to show that trust and transparency. Seamless integrations with planning, for example, such as Salesforce sales planning, is going to be crucial as well, so that there's that clear linkage between planning the comp plan itself and then actually administering it in a comp tool. Including comprehensive visibility end-to-end is going to remove any blind spots. It's going to allow you to more effectively analyze and make changes as you go, as well as build that trust in your reps. And then finally, it's going to help unlock access to essential decision-making data. If you don't have the data at your disposal, or there's too much friction to get to that data, or it's decoupled from what it actually means, right, then you're not going to be able to effectively analyze the impact of your plan. So moving into kind of your options here with a comp tool and how you actually go about executing this. As I already said, spreadsheets are great because they're easy to use, but at the same time, they do not scale. They do not provide the visibility that you need. They're usually not real time in any way, shape, or form. So you're really hampering yourself in terms of being able to drive the behavior that you need with the comp plan you spent so much time planning on. On the other end of the spectrum, we have the legacy vendors that are super scalable, but they are not easy to maintain at all. And so the job shifts from, planning and analyzing and iterating to more just keeping it alive, right? And that's a very tactical approach and kind of removes the strategy from the process there. So really the sweet spot that Spiff is striving to be in here is that ability to self-manage like a spreadsheet, but also the ability to scale so that you can really have that clear link between sales planning and sales comp plan execution, and also motivate the reps, provide that transparency like we discussed previously. So some of the key challenges I've already touched on here in inefficiencies. Most companies that aren't using a modern comp tool, the reps aren't able to trace through what's going on with their comp plan. Auditability is going to be a huge challenge. Reporting, like we mentioned, it's crucial to be able to get to that data. But if you have to, have a PhD in BI tools like Power BI or something, you're not going to be able to figure out what you need there. And then finally, because there's so much friction within the whole comp process, you're going to be bogged down in dispute resolution with most of your time.
Max, I know so many people are still using spreadsheets. Like, can you give a little background on what that transition from spreadsheets to a solution like Spiff looks like? Because I'm sure that can be intimidating to people who have been just so prone and used to using spreadsheets.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's definitely a paradigm shift all around. Spreadsheets are great. We all love them because you can just get in there and do what you need to do. But it's important to keep in mind who all the stakeholders are. At the end of the day, comp is so much more than just getting the math right. You want to incentivize your sales reps to actually drive behavior, right? So in my opinion, that's the most important piece. And a spreadsheet is not going to be able to do that for you. So when you keep these things in mind, going into the transition process, I think it's really important to think about a new future for you rather than just kind of lifting and shifting your spreadsheet into a tool like Spiff. And obviously, we have a great implementation team here. There's also several, consulting firms out there that help with this process. But they're all going to make it super easy for you. Our implementation team is going to handle that important architecture side of things, and really make this an easy transition for you and provide all the training that you need.
That's super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So just one more stat here to throw at you. So organizations lose on average $4 million in revenue to a single non-compliance event. But only 51% of organizations are using data to actually analyze here. So if you don't have access to that data and you're not using it to analyze, that 4 million in loss or whatever it might be, you pretty much don't even know it's there, right? And you don't know what the drivers are. So really important that not only do you have a tool to administer these types of things, but you have a strategy about how you're going to actually report on it and analyze it. Okay. So for the next section, we're going to talk about how we align comp with business objectives. So just a couple things to call out here. First, we're going to talk about identifying the objectives. Then once we've identified those objectives, incorporated them into our comp plan and actually, executed on them, then we need to evaluate what the impact was to make sure that it is in fact effective. And then finally, once we've done that, we can start to expose areas where we can unlock new value. Either value we didn't even know was there, or we can just maximize our value generating activities. So focusing on what the business objectives are in the first place, I think it's absolutely essential that you have top-down alignment across all departments on what your key objectives are. So we'll get into this in a little bit, but I often see that, especially in the world of comp, where virtually every department is touching it in some way, shape, or form, you see very different agendas being pushed. So if you don't keep that kind of keystone guiding principle intact of this is where the business is going, these are the objectives we have, here's how we're going to get there. If you don't have that, you start to just get a lot of confusion and you just muddy the waters completely in terms of planning your comp plans and executing on them. So a couple of things to call out here, referencing back to 2023. We've obviously seen a shift from pure growth to high margin products and activities. So that's, again, a huge business objective there. Also, a need to address discounting and incentivizing price increases, super important when you're not necessarily able to generate as much new business as previously. And then also just identifying faster deal cycles and implementations to maximize efficiency. Great area for you to kind of rethink your business if possible. If you're just kind of chasing the same business you always have and those deal cycles take forever, the implementations take forever, you're potentially leaving a lot on the table if you don't chase things that are faster and you get that time to value much quicker. So next, evaluating the impact and the alignment. So a couple things, a couple examples here we can focus on. New product performance, for example. So did adding a new product to the compensation plan actually yield those desired results? So we've seen this a ton this year where maybe there's a new product, like it's a good upsell product, or maybe it's a high margin product that we want to push. So we incorporate that some way into the comp plan, but then we need to measure and analyze, did this actually impact the bottom line? Did this accomplish the business objective? Additionally, projection assessment. Did the sales projections actually live up to the potential you were hoping for? So taking that product example, I'm sure your finance people kind of mapped that out, had projections on it. And without a complete comprehensive view of that, start to finish journey from like a lead through closing the deal to then actually paying the rep the commissions on it. If you don't have that insight, then you're not going to be able to understand if your projection was accurate. And then finally, this leads into kind of the bottom line for the reps and ultimately the company on your quota evaluation. Again, you need the data to be able to analyze this. And if you don't, then you won't necessarily know if your quotas were accurate in the first place. And then finally, unlocking value. So with a streamlined process for designing comp plans and flexible technology like Spiff at your disposal, we're able to redirect time and resources to more valuable work, like actually comp plan ROI analysis. So many companies we come across are just completely stuck in the tactical. They're getting by day, dealing with disputes, having to make adjustments, figuring out why one rep didn't get comped on something. They just cannot get out of that reactive tactical mode. So when you are able to move to a tool that allows you to execute on your carefully crafted comp plans, then you're able to actually step back and start focusing on those value generating activities like ROI analysis. When you have the data at your disposal, you're able to uncover trends, draw correlations between comp structure and the actual performance that it drove. With that, you can then identify gaps and flaws in the comp plan design in itself. So again, good example here. If we think about like incentivizing a fast start to the quarter, you might want to provide some extra spiff if people close deals within the first month of a quarter, right? Seems logical, seems to make sense, but when you actually measure that, an important thing to keep in mind is the first month of a quarter is also right after the last month of a quarter. So the end result might be you start having deals slip at the end of the quarter so that the rep can get more. So without the data and without the ability to effectively analyze that, you won't know that the spiff you incorporated is actually accomplishing its goal. And then finally, when you have all this information at your disposal and an effective strategy to do something with it, you can optimize the comp plans to actually drive the value-based things you're trying to accomplish. So just a couple more stats to call out here. So this is an example of that new product intro. So, in this case, let's say you wanted to boost sales of product 3, which was released in Q1. So you put a spiff in place for April. Did that actually increase sales for product 3 result and a decrease in other product sales? Did the spiff result in long-term success for product 3? If you don't have the granular data, the granular reporting to actually effectively analyze that, you're pretty much just going to be guessing the whole time, and a lot of it's going to be anecdotal. And most of the time, it's also going to be pretty much, very much in delay. You'll have a lag there in your effectiveness of analyzing. So another example of something you can do with this data is knowing how efficient your sales org actually is. So this is an example report that we encourage anyone we're working with to think about is what is the actual cost of commissions per month or per period that you're having to pay out. And when you think about the art of the possible here, the finance team, they're going to know how much business was closed. They're going to know how many commissions were paid out. But if you don't have a clear link kind of start to finish there, then you really don't understand what is the actual cost of revenue generation, since commissions are such a key cost in that equation. So really being able to report on that and effectively analyze is invaluable information for like your CFO and your finance teams. Okay, moving on to the next section. Again, we talked about with 2023, new business being a little bit more challenging to come by. So we've seen a huge increase in things like expansion metrics and growth metrics. So for example, looking at 2020 versus 2023, we saw a decrease from 61.4% to 52.9% in new business ARR. And then in the same time period, we saw an increase in expansion, upsell, cross-sell ARR from 29% to 36.3%. So you can see the model has very much shifted in 2023 away from new business and towards cultivating those longer term relationships that you already have. And if you don't, if you haven't noticed this or you haven't been focusing on it, you're potentially leaving a lot of revenue on the table that can help to kind of counteract that loss in new business generation. But when we actually talk about things like retention and upsells and things like that, it's really important that we actually define what it is we're talking about. Some key things that are key terms that are worth measuring that you might want to think about are renewal rate, upsell rate, churn rate, average deal size, average contract value increase, products sold per customer, customer lifetime value. And the important thing here, in my opinion, is thinking about finding that balance of things that are actually achievable for your retention teams that feel fair, but also are still helping to drive the underlying business objective. Good example here, churn is inevitable. It does happen for a number of reasons, and it's not always completely fair to just solely comp your retention team on a churn metric or some kind of loss metric there. So finding a balance that feels like the retention team still has control over it, but also is still making sure you're accomplishing your business goals of not losing too much business. And then finally, this is actually a surprising area of confusion for a lot of organizations, is actually defining who your expansion and retention teams are. I've seen a lot of scenarios where they do not have clearly defined rules of engagement here. And when it's everybody's job, it ends up being nobody's job. So I do think some things to think about here are with your account executives, it is important, in my opinion, to kind of nurture that long-term relationship with them. So you might want to think about things like giving account executives the responsibility and also the compensation for thinking about expansions for a certain period of time after new business closes. And a very important reason for this is a lot of times as an account executive, you are looking to get in the door with a company, right? You're looking at that land and expand model. But if you're not incentivized on the coming expansion, then that very much is going to disincentivize you to even get the new business in the first place. Because it might start as a really small deal with huge upside in 6 months, but if you're not comped on that, why waste your time on the initial small deal now? So something to think about there. And then customer success. I think a lot of times too much falls on customer success and they just end up being the de facto expansion team. Which again, they're going to be the ones cultivating the long-term relationship. So it's important to comp them on this. But you also just need to think about, is this something in their skill set? Do they have the enablement to be able to effectively do this? And also, do they even have the time, right? If they're so busy, bogged down with keeping all their customers happy, then the last thing they're going to be wanting to do is, risk the relationship by trying to, throw more stuff at the customer. And then finally, don't see this nearly enough, but having a dedicated customer account manager or a farmer team, I think, is the ultimate goal here. I know it's not always feasible, especially with a small growing organization. But once you do have that clearly defined ROE and you have someone whose specific job it is to do this, then you are able to just unlock a whole lot more business here. Okay. Moving on now to personalizing incentive programs. So personalization versus standardization. Coming from the lens of a comp admin, personalization sounds like a nightmare. I can tell you, I've seen so many companies where they have 50 sales reps and they have 45 comp plans, and each one is appended with the name of the rep. And then there's always that one guy who's been there, 40 years, and he has his special comp plan that has prior approval from like the founder of the company. So definitely a nightmare from an administration standpoint. So I think it is absolutely crucial that you seek standardization as much as possible. A lot of this also stems from the tool you're actually using. When you have a scalable enterprise solution that kind of helps you to avoid that bloat within the system, helps you to find that reusability in a dynamic manner, then this can really help to reduce the number of comp plans you have, just making your life easier as an admin. All this being said, though, it is super important to also identify areas where you can personalize for the specific rep. Just an important stat here, salespeople are 50% more likely to leave their job if they're dissatisfied with their comp plan. And I think this is an area where you can really help to drive that satisfaction. It doesn't have to be the core metric is different for every single rep. That can get out of hand. But if you can identify a manageable mix between the core metrics like new business bookings and then individualized MBO, personal growth style metrics, I think that is a great way to keep it refreshed for the rep and keep them motivated. And more importantly, just kind of help keep them focused on what their why is. Everyone is motivated by different things. I think most reps probably become reps because they're motivated by money, right? But if you do a little digging, I'm sure you can find that there's usually more to it than that. Just a quick anecdote here. I was recently at a conference where we met with a consulting firm that actually focuses on things like personalized metrics. And the range of kind of additional MBO metrics that they've put into place and their effectiveness has been, really impressive. And I think it's something worth considering. So a few examples there. They basically sit down with the reps at the start of the year, say, you have this $10,000 budget essentially for your MBO. What do you want your MBO to be? And it could range from, you have two really competitive reps who want to pit themselves against each other. So it's whoever B2 gets the 10 grand. For other people, it's, I want to take my family to Disney World on the company's dollar. So they'll do that. Another guy wanted a BMW. So all of these things, they just become much more tangible and much more real. And because it's not necessarily just pure dollars, I think it's a great way to keep it fresh for the rep and keep them motivated in a different way that is less sterile, like bookings versus quota. Okay, so again, getting into motivation here. So comp plans and policies have a huge impact on the behavior of your team. 90% of top performing companies utilize an incentive program to reward the sales associates. Properly structured programs increase performance by 44%, and companies utilizing an incentive program report 79 success rate. So again, keep these things in mind when you are crafting your comp plans. Are the things you're using to motivate, are they actually motivating? And are they going to drive the behavior that you need there?
And yeah, to that point, I think it's so important to find out what motivates your reps, because like you said, every rep can be so different. So I love that.
Cool, thanks, Megan. Okay, just a couple things I want to call out here. When we're thinking about the various elements of comp, one thing to keep in mind is going to be quality versus quantity. Shifting focus a little bit to more like your business development teams. These can be actually really challenging plans to come up with. The essence of them is really pretty simple. They have a job of booking meetings, right? But it's important to really dive in there and figure out, with the nuance of your business, what is going to move the needle here. Is your business simply a volume game? So you need to just, compensate your BDR team on generating as many meetings as possible? Or do you have a much more complex and long sales cycle where qualification is the name of the game rather than just volume? So finding that appropriate mix is going to be really important there. And again, just kind of moving into a lack of nuance there. If you don't capture the full scope of what the effort is, you're not going to be able to effectively incentivize it. And then finally, the metrics themselves, what actually constitutes the outcome? Are you accomplishing what you need to do? For some things like new bookings versus quota, that can be very clear cut. But again, thinking about like BDR teams, that's not necessarily going to be as clear cut. You can measure them just on having a call, but what was the quality of that call? Was it a good call? Did it actually lead to something? And how can you incorporate that into your comp plan? And then finally, just kind of a repetition on things we've already touched on, aligning with the business goals. This ensures that everyone across every comp plan is driving towards those goals. Performance motivation, able to see a direct link between their efforts and the financial reward. Again, that leads into the transparency, the trust, and just being able to make that one-to-one relationship between objective and outcome. And then finally, meritocracy. Healthy competition is definitely a good thing in the world of sales. And it's going to encourage reps to continually find their own efficiencies, their own ways to improve, and their own ways to keep performing. And then at the end of the day, when you align your comp plans with your culture and goals, that's when you begin to actually feel in sync. I think, in a high growth startup, this can be very simple, very clear. You just simply need more customers, more new customers, and that can be the whole culture of the company that you're trying to drive there. But this can get, kind of lost in the shuffle as organizations grow and scale, and you just get more people within the org, more diverse teams in terms of, you have customer account managers, lots of different functions within business development. It just becomes much more filtered down, being able to make that link between culture and goals and then what's actually being driven there. Okay. So involving key stakeholders in the comp planning process. I touched on this earlier, but the key takeaway here is to avoid comp planning in a bubble. Like I said, different stakeholders all have different priorities, and these are all real ones that I've heard out in the field from the different personas that we interact with. So sales reps, they just want to get paid accurately, right? Sales leaders, they often complain that they don't have actionable insights. They have no idea how their team's performing. They have no idea how to coach their team to improve. So they simply need that data at their fingertips in a very digestible way. Sales and RevOps, they're usually, in my opinion, they're the best positioned to make that link between motivating and driving objectives, as well as making sure reps get paid accurately. So I think they're in a unique position there. When I come across accounting, I literally have heard this. It's just math, and in my opinion, kind of missing the broader picture there. Finance, it's always they want to cut costs in some way. IT, they're off in their own world thinking about just the systems and how they're going to plug into each other. And then HR, they have different objectives as well in terms of attracting and then more importantly, retaining talent. So if you plan your comp plans with each of these different priorities in a bubble, you're going to end up with a very different comp plan. You're also probably going to end up with a different tool for actually executing those comp plans. Like if it's accounting, you're going to be in spreadsheets. That's just kind of how it is. So only when you kind of uncover what these different priorities are and then unite them behind the overall business objective, can you actually start to develop a cohesive comp plan that drives everyone's priorities, but also the ultimate business objective. Okay, a couple more things here. Thinking about individual and team-based metrics, the individual ones are really pretty clear. But we've seen a huge growth, especially in a year like 2023, in more diverse ways of incentivizing people, just to kind of soften that blow of things like new bookings quota attainment, much more challenging to achieve. So some team metrics you might want to think about are like a team revenue accelerator. This is a great way to foster collaboration, knowledge sharing, and just teamwork in general. One of my favorites here is having a pod between your core sales team of your SDR or BDR, an AE, and then like a sales engineer. This is a great way to kind of foster that start to finish strategy and make a really great buying process for your prospect. And then finally, team-based spiffs and bonuses. This is a great way, again, to, like I said, soften the blow for the individual metrics that might not be there, and just keep the team motivated towards a common goal. Okay, a few more things here. So incentivizing key touch points in the sales cycle. For a lot of businesses, momentum is absolutely key, especially when you have a longer sales cycle. So something to consider here is what are different times you could actually pay out incentives. So if we think about a very simple deal flow here from discovery to closed won, Moving from discovery to qualified could be a great way to compensate definitely your business development team, but also maybe the rep themselves as well. And then finally, when you get to verbal, there can be still a long way to go between verbal and closed won, but just to kind of keep that momentum going, that could be another touch point where you provide some incentive. And then obviously, the final payout at closed won there. I think there were supposed to be some dollars in there. I don't know where they went. Okay. So definitely can't get through any webinar in 2023 without at least touching on AI. I will try to avoid buzzwords as best I can and just focus on the key things here. When we think about AI, specifically in the world of comp and a comp tool like Spiff, a few key areas that we can focus on are, number one, seamless integrations, number two, automating complex tasks, and then finally, actionable insights. So just to briefly touch on some areas in AI that Spiff is thinking about, AI can be a great tool to help with filtering through that just barrage of junk data flowing into your system. So it can analyze, organize, flag anomalies, and also just identify anything wrong with the data that's potentially going to impact the calculation of the comp. Additionally, automating complex tasks with AI. It's no secret that comp can be rather complex. It can be hard to understand. So this is actually something that we've incorporated into Spiff, where AI can explain in normal language what the comp plan is actually doing. And this is a great way, in my opinion, to kind of help preserve that linkage between what the comp plan says and then how it was executed. I think a lot can be lost there because you're writing logic that can be foreign to a sales rep. So this can be a great tool to help keep that understanding and keep that linkage. And then finally, I think everyone is just starting to scratch the surface here, but AI, in my opinion, is going to be kind of the future here in terms of analyzing the data and, more importantly, providing actionable insights. Data can be very hard to filter through. It can be hard to know what to look for. So with the power of AI, you're able to use that to kind of filter through the noise, and most importantly, provide insights that you can actually do something about. Okay, and that is the deck. So any questions?
Max, with the plan logic explainer, has that reduced questions between finance and sales? Because I can imagine sales reps see some components of their comp plan and just have no idea what they're even looking at. So can you touch on that a little?
Yeah, so that definitely can help there. Where I think I've seen the bigger impact though is when you have a multi-member comp team who's all working with the comp tool, it can sometimes lead to confusion of who built what, why they built it a certain way. So when you have something like a comp logic explainer, it can just kind of help keep the system cleaner in general, because I don't have to go remake something just because I don't understand what already exists. I can use the tool to explain what it is, and then I don't have any more questions there. I don't have to ping someone to figure it out. The tool gives me everything I need to figure it out.
Yeah, and just continues to build that trust. That's awesome. Love it. If anyone has any additional questions, please feel free to message in the chat or Q&A. Max, I thought that was an amazing overview and just so many tactical takeaways for 2024. As you mentioned, like 2023 coming out of it, I think there are so many learning moments, and people are excited to kind of like get it right this year. So thank you so much for that overview. And for those that joined in, thank you so much. We'll be sending a recording, as I mentioned at the top. So you'll get that over email and follow up. And if you have any further questions for us or want to get in contact with Max or Spiff in general, don't miss that get a demo button up top. But thank you so much for your time today. Thank you, Max.
Thank you.